Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session. Just a couple of things. We'd like to thank Splice Media, who have been so helpful in helping us conceive this festival, and also they're funding the festival. So thank you, Alan and Rashad at Splice Media. So on that note, I'm going to pass. Oh, did I introduce myself? I'm Itisha, by the way, from Boju. I'm the co-founder of Bojubajai, and now I'm going to pass the mic to my partner in crime, Prikuti Rai.
Oh, hi, thank you, Itisha. Thank you, Itisha. Hi, Itisha, thank you. Thank you. Hi, I'm Prikuti Rai, and I am also a co-founder of Bojubajai, and thank you so much for joining us in this interesting session. I would like to introduce our guests. Today, we have Sangkalpa Gurung from Hamro Yatra podcast.
For many years, thousands of Nepalis have been moving overseas with the hopes of a better education, job, and lifestyle. Some find success in conventional fields, while some carve their own paths. Who is to say one is better than the other? Success is a journey, not a destination. So, come on this journey with me, where we connect with our Nepali communities living overseas and explore their conventional and unconventional paths. My name is Sangkalpa Gurung, and this is Hamro Yatra.
So Sangkalpa, welcome to all ears. And before I let you talk, like you do in Hamro Yatra, we'd like to open with an icebreaker. So, what is the one
Tell me about this one.
What is the one superpower that you would want to have if you ever had a choice? And then we have one more secret question like this, a second icebreaker. So let's start with that first.
Thank you for the introduction. So if I could choose one superpower, it would probably be to know what the other person is thinking without them having to say like what they're thinking, or so to be able to understand them. Another thing was language, like I'd be able to understand and speak their people's language. And I think that'd be really cool. Like I'd be able to have conversations and have all these interviews with people without that language barrier.
Yeah.
Mine would, sorry. I'm also very tempted to share about mine, although nobody's asking. I would be like, I wish I could eat all the food in the world and I would have excellent gut health at all times. So wherever I'd go, I could just eat stuff my face. Anyway, and the second, which takes me to our another icebreaker question, very original, not copied from any podcast, is if there's one food that you could eat for the rest of your life, what food would that be? Okay,
that was not very. You don't even have to finish the question. I can eat all day, every day. Like,
do you make them yourself? Do you get decent momos where you are?
I was in London before, and mom used, like, she makes the best momos, and I think everyone says their mom makes the best momos, but seriously, my mom makes the best momos. I literally almost turned into a momo. Okay, the momo I think I had like 3-4 days straight. And my flight, I had to leave like at 6 in the morning, and 5:30 mom was like, momo khani ho, last momo khaya. Oh. And she's a big enabler, so yeah.
So Sangkalpa, let's talk about your podcast a little bit. First of all, I think it's amazing that you're able to just have this lineup of really great guests, and to be able to sort of do it in a consistent manner, and you always like do your research. You're so sort of because when you start listening to an episode and you start listening to sort of your conversation with the other guests, it doesn't feel like that it feels like we've sort of entered like at a point where you've already formed a bond. So I think that's super special. How do you do it?
I think it's all from my own personal interest in that person's life, So most of the guests that I interview, I've only met them the first time when I interview them. So maybe I've had a few chats like Instagram or DM or emails saying, hey, introducing myself, asking them if they're going to be open to doing this and scheduling that. That's the only interaction that I've had with them. Everything else, like we just start with the icebreaker. And I think that really helps to really ease the guest as well and think about like
with that in mind, and then when you talk about things, I think it just flows naturally as well, because like I start my podcast asking them about their childhood and some things that they haven't really thought about in a while, right? So like, how many times would you think about your childhood? So just them starting to go back in memory lane, and then if the guests have grown up in Nepal, we have things in common. Right? I guess some of the chungi kheleko kuraharu niskन्छ, and I'm like, oh my god, I did that as well. Rubber band kheleko kura niskन्छ. So that's just such a great way to bond with your guests as well. Ani doing my research, I think you can call it stalking, but I would like to call it technically researching. I'm really good at it, I guess. And so like that really helps me find like different things. I remember when I met Gaumaya for the first time, like interview gardahiri, I think I saw like one photo on Facebook, like where she was wearing like a blue something. And I was like, oh, okay, so like 2008, Matimi, you were wearing blue, you were going there. And she was like, oh my God. I'm like, I know that sounded very stalkerish. And like, I had to like move my podcast. But like, it was such a funny thing because like, I took it very seriously. I know, like, because it is something like, I know I'm doing this out of my own passion without any like help or anything in terms of finances or like professionally, but I also take it quite seriously in terms of making sure that I've researched them. I don't want to ask them some questions I know, but so giving them that extra experience as well, that's quite important to me.
Yeah, I think what you said about doing this on your own and sort of like, I think you've already said that you're like a one-person team, researching and like interviewing, editing, doing the social media, and a lot of people who sort of like reach out to us sometimes or are probably also listening to this session are curious about, what are some of the things that I could learn from someone like you? Like they might be interested in starting a podcast. So something that we've asked all our speakers so far is like, what have been some of the lessons that you've learned along the way as you started this out? Because for a lot of us, it's something that we do initially, like resources time on our own, and then how you carve time for that. So are there some lessons that you'd like to share along the way that you had?
So with this podcast, it might look like I'm a one-person team, but it's like, it takes a whole village to raise a child. I've got like my own support system as well. So my husband, he's really into music. So he does like, he put his hand up and said, I'm going to do your music. So Hamro Yatra intro, outro, he like made it himself. He taught me how to edit the podcast. Before that, I like did not know what to do. The cutting, so he really taught me that. And even now, like I do the first edits and he helps me finish that edit to make it more professional, right? So without him, like I don't know if Hamro Yatra would have the same quality that it does now. And on the other hand, my sister, like she's very good at design and art. I mean, she did like Hamro Yatra logo.
Which is great, by the way. Yeah.
And she's also very good at like social media, like about cake rakhnu paryo, post rakhnu paryo bhane I overthink it, okay? And I think, should I say this? Should I say that? And she just does it. And 2-3 seconds, she's like posted the whole thing. And I'm like, oh my God, like, how are you so good at it? So she does most of that as well and takes that little load off my plate. So over here, that kitty, I'm the one talking, I'm doing this. And there are people behind me. And like, even my mom, she's like, Hamro Yatra ambassador, she like talks about Spotify.
Yeah, we all need those kind of cheerleaders at home.
Yeah, so it's like it's been like a family effort, and I'm very grateful for it because I think it really, there was just an idea that I thought I would do this, but when you start thinking of the logistics of it all, it can get a bit overwhelming. And having this kind of support really helps push you make that first step. And then it's about consistency and having that time as well. But when I started this, it was during COVID lockdown, so I had a lot of time in my hands. Time I could like reach out to guests, make a whole lineup. I had like 3-4 guests already lined up. Recording I wasn't rushed. It was much easier. But now things have changed. Like I've moved back to Australia. I have like a job that's very demanding. I'm doing my master's as well. So it's taken Hamro Yatra is taking a bit of a hiatus at the moment because I'm like, I want to start. I still have so many stories to share of people that I'm interested in. But I don't have the time to prioritize it at the moment. So I think a lot of the times that's what happens with podcasts. Like you started, but it's about going along with it and making sure you have the time for it. I am frankly struggling with at the moment.
Yeah, but life happens, right? I mean, and hopefully once you feel more settled, more comfortable, and you have more time, you'll just be able to pick it up and go with it again.
Like when I come back, I'm gonna come back with a bang, because the lineup that I have is just amazing. And like I've already reached out to guests. It's just about planning the logistics of it all, interview, make sure I have a few more guests before I release episodes, so I'm not feeling rushed. So hopefully in a month or two we'll be back.
That's amazing news.
So Sangkalpa, like through all of the episodes, I mean, you've sort of interacted, or your guests represent different identities. So, some might be like first generation Nepalis abroad, some might be second generation, third generation. So obviously sort of the vision of your podcast is about connecting and engaging with the Nepali diaspora, but also, highlighting success stories as well, whatever success might mean, right? So have you noticed like how your conversations change when you're engaging with someone who's perhaps first generation or someone who's like second generation,
I think in terms of like their stories, it's more so about their childhood that's different. I know. So maybe if it's like second generation, they've grown up overseas and they have had a different childhood compared to Nepal. They might have had to deal with a lot more things like racism or different things wherever they are, which we wouldn't have dealt with a lot back in Nepal growing up. Like we have our own different kinds of things happening in Nepal, but it's very different to overseas. And we never had to assimilate in like a different Western culture either. So I think talking about their experiences, it's difference in growing up. But in terms of what success means to them or where they see themselves going into, their commitment to their identity, I guess, like it's sort of the same. So they relating to being a Nepali, they wanting to do something about Nepali community back home, or trying to be up to date with what's happening. I know, but Nepal may not, but maybe the Nepali community in London or Australia or wherever they are, trying to be connected with them. And I think that is a common theme between all my guests. So first generation, second generation, they have that common theme that they identify themselves as Nepali first. And they want to do something for the Nepali community.
Yeah, I think following up on that about the connection that all the guests sort of have, and sort of some of their shared concerns or with their identity or homeland. All Kuche was that because one of the things we also wanted to talk with all our speakers here is about how they've been able to build a community outside of just a podcast as a product, right? So for you, how has it been when you are sort of reaching out to these guests? Has any of these sort of interactions online led to the formation of any sort of community of folks in the diaspora, or whether it's led to some sort of like offline connectivity, because Nepalese right now are spread throughout the world, and especially in countries like the UK, where there's like a significant number of Nepalese who've migrated there over the years. So has your podcast in any way helped you, or create this community or be part of those kind of communities there?
Definitely. I think for me, growing up for a very long time, I tried to stay away from the Nepali community. Hong Kong ma bhaye pani, Australia ma bhaye pani. Ani Hamro Yatra was my effort to stay connected, to build that community. And for anyone going through what I was going through, to help them bring them back that sense of community, Nepali community khalko. And doing this podcast, like the guests that I've met, they've all been super lovely. Like lockdown we couldn't meet like in person, but we've kept in touch even now with the guests, and we like share stories still, and we've become good friends. So like it's actually quite warming to see, like even as adults and meeting just online, you can make good friends. And that's been good. In terms of listeners, like you get such lovely comments on like about someone just reached out saying like, oh, it's Gurung bhaira pani yesto gareko. Like it's very good to see that. I listen to your podcast while making breakfast for my family. And like you feel nice, like being part of someone else's life and bringing that connectedness for them. And like when I released this podcast, I was thinking, even if 100 people listen to this, I'll be happy. I know. And I didn't expect like people to actually reach out to me and say like, oh, you're doing such a wonderful job. Like, this has really helped me. And I've got comments like, hey, Nepali podcast bhaera pani, like, it sounds nice. So like, pretty sure you guys understand this.
Yeah.
And so the different things, but I think it's all opening their eyes to what we can do as well as podcasters. I know. Like I've got my friends from America who listen to it, don't understand Nepali, and sometimes I speak Nepali with my guests, depending on how comfortable they are. And they're like, "Oh, you guys also like change between English and Nepali when you do that. We do that as well." I'm like, so it's a universal thing, like so they're getting to know our culture as well, and like it's nice to be able to share that through such a universal medium.
Yeah. We actually get criticized a lot for switching between Nepali and English.
You stick to one language, you two over smart ladies. I just speak Nepali बोल्नु शुद्ध नेपाली अथवा तपाईहरु अंग्रेजी मात्रै हान्नुहोस् हामीलाई यो हामीलाई मिक्स गट मन परेन भन्नेहरु छ but you know that's just the nature of internet and a lot of
and my guests asked me like, oh, do you want to do this in Nepali or English? You know, they're used to both, right? And I was like, whatever's comfortable. Like we're doing like back and forth, and I'm like, that's fine, because that's how you would normally talk to your friends, right? Like the 90% English, like that's just life. So like I want to keep it as natural as possible.
Yeah.
So just to go back to what you mentioned, you know, about you growing up, about your childhood, and perhaps how that has been the source of inspiration for you to now do this podcast. You know, what was it like growing up like as a Nepali in Hong Kong or in Brunei, because you've lived in different places?
Yeah, so majority of my life, I see some I did in Kathmandu. So like I can definitely relate to all my Tamil days, combined study गर्ने भनेर Tamil घुम्नु जाने, like all that stuff. Like I've done it all. But after that, I went to the States to study, and I met like a diverse group of people. Ani Hong Kong पनि बसे, Australia आए, but I never felt the need to be connected to a Nepali community, because I thought अब नेपालमै हुर्केको मान्छे बाहिर गएर why नेपालीहरु नै. I know, like I've come overseas to like meet other new people. So that was the mentality. And then it was when I was in Sydney and I was starting listening to podcasts, and I would think, oh, this is such a cool thing, like interviewing like all these different personalities and asking them about their lives. But there was something about that I couldn't relate to 100%, okay, because like of their background or who they were or where they were from. And I'd always think to myself, like, oh, I wish there was like a Nepali podcast that covered like Nepali personalities. And it doesn't have to be like proper celebrities, just like Nepali ordinary mancheru, ne? It's so cool to listen to everyone's journey because it's also different. And I just kept thinking about that for like a year or two. I mean, when I went to London, I thought, maybe my garnu parla kya hola, as a joke, just to myself, like, because I talk to myself a lot. So just that thought, and I seriously started considering it. And when I told my husband and my sister, and they were both like very excited about it, which I didn't expect. And they were like, yep, you're gonna have to do it. You're gonna do it. I'm like, okay, yep. I needed that kind of boost of confidence to like back me up. And I'm like, you know what, let's do it. And he came, like I had nothing to lose. So I just went for it.
Yeah. I mean, what do you hope your listeners get out of your episodes? Like, you know, because you obviously frame your questions in a certain way, and so anyone listening to Hamro Yatra, do you already think about, okay, your episode, this is the kind of impact I want to create, or this is the effect I want to create, or I hope the listeners take this away from this episode?
Not at all. Like I only know that one when I'm editing the episode, because even if I have researched on a guest's life or I have the questions ready, depending on the guest answers, like that's how the conversation flows, and they might reveal something that completely changes what I was thinking the episode was going to be about. So I keep an open mind when I do my episodes. in terms of inspiration, what I think I would hope that the listeners get is that the whole point of Hamro Yatra is everyone has their own journeys. I know you can't compare one person's journey with somebody else and think, oh my gosh, she's already at the end goal and I'm just starting. You know, Bunny, other person might have been working on that for 10, 15 years. You don't know people's stories. And so you can't really judge that just by looking at the one glimpse of their life story on Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is. I mean, the other thing that was really important to me was this idea of success. Like just growing up in Nepal, when you're good in studies, everyone tells you have to be a doctor, engineer, or a lawyer. I think everyone goes through that. Bhaina bhane business pada. Huncha ni last ma gaera arts. That's how the cheer goes, right? There is nothing wrong with studying arts. Like if you're passionate about it, like I'm so jealous about those people who are like passionate about something and go for that and like really thrive in that field. Okay, I wanted to showcase that and maybe bring more light to the fact that success doesn't look one way. Like you are the person who defines what success is. Right? Your mom doesn't, your dad doesn't, your family doesn't. You decide what success is. So it could look like 1 million likes on Instagram. If that is success to you, then that is what it is. If it is just something, I know, like it's completely up to you. Okay. And I really want to highlight the importance of that. You know, I think we get so lost in comparing and trying to go for like this society called success. That's not it.
Yeah. I think we do want to talk about the Nepali identity, you know, especially your diaspora ma Nepali there have been stories the kind of different people you brought to the show and the kind of diverse experiences they have sort of give us some insight into how different and difficult in many ways on many levels it is for Nepalese who are migrating abroad for several reasons, family, the studies. So we want to talk about that also, but a little bit about you talked about how your show ko flow you're always open to us depending on what the guests say, what they talk about, and what you said was it's like your first in-person interaction with them, Shoma. So sometimes when the guests really open up and talk about their deepest fear or some of the most traumatic, difficult experiences that they've had in their lives, how do you as a presenter, as a host, sort of like I would start crying with them, or so that happens because a lot of the podcasters that we have here also try to talk to, for example, Period Kakura tries to talk to women and girls about the experience of menstruation and some of the things that they're subjected to when because it's such a taboo in certain parts of the country. So this how do you sort of still remain calm and still make sure that the guest is comfortable, because sometimes it happens in these conversations. So how do you make sure you do that well and sort of it's so that the person who's sharing this also feels dignified in sharing those sort of really personal stories?
That's a really good question. And I think I might be the wrong person to answer this because I just let the guest be. And I have Hamro Yatra ma, you'll see the podcast episode is maybe 49 minutes, 45 minutes. But I usually end up talking to the guest for over an hour, at least 2 hours, 3 hours sometimes. Means a lot of editing work for me. But obviously, I just let the guest be. We just have a natural talk. And we go off tangent so many times. And after we've had that conversation out, then we come back to the flow of the thing that we need to talk about. I've had instances where I've cried with my guests. I've had instances where I've choked up while listening to the guest. And I've had to repeat myself again. It's difficult. And because it's not a live session, it's easy to be more natural and let them have their space. And I think when you're just listening, it really gives them that space to open up as well. And you're doing that in such a non-judgmental way as well, that they feel free to disclose all the things that they are talking about. For me, I just let them be, and that's how the conversation goes. And if I need to bring them back to talk about something else, make sure that they're okay to go ahead, and happy to move in the direction that we want.
Yeah.
And then we talk about it, and then I just do my edits later. Yeah.
Can you talk about maybe like something like, that really surprised you, during one of the episodes, or something that really took you to a place where you thought like you would never be at, like something surprising or something? Yeah.
I think so. When I started Hamro Yatra, I had all these guests in my mind thinking one day I might interview them, but I never thought, and I've reached out to them and they've said yes. So when they said yes, I'm like, wait, really? Like you're you're okay talking to me? Like, are you sure? Like I have to read it quite a few times and I have to reconfirm with them. Okay, so just confirming that this is what you want, like you've said yes to this. And even when they appear, like, and I like go on my Zoom sessions like 10-15 minutes before the interview, and as I'm waiting, I'm thinking they're probably not going to show up. Like, it's not like I don't have like a brand image. I don't have like something already set up by like it's just a podcast that I started like less than a year ago, like at that point. When they actually show up and they just have the same fears as we do. They don't think they're successful. They think they've got such a long way to go, and they're so down to earth. Like I think, wow, like we're all just like, that's the whole point of like, you can't just compare and think, oh, you see someone like singing on YouTube and getting million views, you think this person's probably like but it's so different.
Wow. Magic has happened. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think that has taken me surprised. I get so much energy from my guests. And it's the ones that I don't know much about that really energize me, because their stories completely take me like off my feet. Like I don't know if you've listened to Dhan Tamang's story, even Janaki Pun's story, like just like listening to them and like what they've gone through and where they are now, it just energizes me so much. Like I have to go for a run after it. Them energy like too excited, like I just have to like relieve my energy. And that's what I really enjoy, getting to know all these people, like different Nepal, but they're doing something for themselves in their own ways.
Yeah. So alikiti identity ko kura garau na hai. It's very complicated because there's so many layers, depending on who you talk to. But if you could think about like certain sort of common things in terms of the challenges that the Nepali diaspora is facing at the moment, whether it be emotional or economic or whatever it is, like if you were to look at all of your episodes and sort of condense your common challenges, your common struggles, say Nepali diaspora ko ahile ke hola bhanदाखेरि, what would you?
I think something that's emerging a little bit more with the new generation is the idea of being connected to Nepal and the idea of Nepali panness. If you've grown up overseas, you probably don't have the same experience as someone who's grown up in Nepal. Maybe when you're speaking Nepali, you've got an accent. Maybe you don't know like afne aba traditional khanekura, then you might have an accent or something. Other people might think, oh, yo ta Nepali धेरै Nepali naरहेछ, because like she can't even speak proper Nepali without an accent. So I think that idea of like even when you're trying to do something for Nepal or learn about being connected to Nepal, if you get dragged down like that, you're not going to want to continue. Right? Like I see that even with my cousins here who grew up here, Nepali धेरै पढ्न आउँदैन, but they're trying to learn French and like Italian in school, like and so I think there's that little disconnect, and it's really important for them to realize this on their own. We can't force them. I know they need to want to connect. So how do we do that? I think if you've grown up in Nepal and you've had a good experience being in like Nepali society, then it's easier for you to connect back home. If you haven't done that, if you've grown overseas, there's that disconnect there, and it's very difficult for them to get connected. No one speaks Nepali in their school. I know. Why would they speak Nepali? Like it's not a fun thing. Like it's not a cool thing.
I've seen something similar in my family also, where like my first cousin, some of them, they come completely detached, completely, with their Nepali identity because of the place, they are in. Some of the places Nepalese have migrated over the years where there isn't a lot of Nepalese out there, or some of the guests who have come to a show have said about the challenges of like assimilating, and in the process they might lose that whatever connection they have with their language or their homeland. So yeah, so that is something. Yeah,
exactly. And how do you bring this back, without forcing them? Force, no one likes it. Even we wouldn't have liked it. So how do we make our culture cool again, so that they're like, ooh, Nepali nesto garcha, like this is quite cool. Like, let me know more about this, because I think that's what grabs their attention.
I think Chef Santosh Shah is doing a little bit of that. Yeah, like having Nepali folks represent, their culture at like a global stage could be like a starting point for a lot of younger folks who might not, like you said, might not have anyone cool or like, doing something interesting, around their identity and culture. But yeah, Itisha, okay.
No, it's kind of understandable also, right? Because suddenly you're having to be part of a culture or be part of the assimilation pressures also in whichever country you're in. And one of the one version of that pressure of assimilation, letting go of your origins, I know. So I wouldn't just sort of blame the Nepalis abroad. Like I would also say it's a question of sort of these structures that are in place. So you read like in the US, for example, there are so many stories, or at least like 2 years ago I read a story where a Korean American woman was speaking in Korean outside this convenience store, and someone called the police on her, like saying like, why are you speaking in Korean? You're in the US. So I just want to say like, there are a lot of political and systems in play too, which perhaps so individually you might want to like engage and connect with your country of origin, but there's all this sort of backlash coming away. You could maybe consider one more.
Because I think there is that pull between assimilating and like staying true, like to where you're coming from, and you making place for, instead of being in harmony, it's like making one place for another. Okay. So that's the challenge. What I found is they've got a really active and a very close-knit Nepali community that can really help with Nepali in the UK. Like it feels like you're very connected, and they all like support each other. And even when I do my interviews, someone knows someone's like, oh, you have to interview this person, that person knows someone. So it's like very collaborative, and it felt very welcoming. Okay.
I have to
share. I have an experience to share.
I also have an experience to share about UK, about Aldershot in particular.
Me too, Aldershot.
I've never felt like, I was like, oh my God, this is like, Nepal, Nepal feel huँदैन जस्तो भएको थियो.
I heard vegetable बेच्ने मान्छे
बोजु भन्दै हो तपाईं नमस्ते भनेर आउने, अनि I was like, because I was not expecting that.
Related to Nepali culture.
Yeah, almost, because there's like, like there's such a big local population of Nepalese there, so it sort of changes the sort of like people think like. I was so surprised. It was like I couldn't believe what that बोजुहरु मजाले लुंगी लाएर टुटिरहेको अनि गोराहरु तरकारी बेचिरहेको उनीहरुसँग नेपालीमा बोल्नु खोजिरहेको. It's like greeting them in Nepali. I was like, oh, that's really nice. So yeah, what's your Aldershot story? And I had like the best chotpate in Aldershot. I can't.
पहिलोचोटि जाँदाखेरि त्यो ट्रेनबाट निस्के हैन, अनि my friend came to pick me up हैन, अनि त्यो ट्रेनको बाटोबाट उसको घरसम्म जान she's like नमस्ते अंकल, नमस्ते आन्टी. अब मलाई पनि भित्रैबाट लाइक त्यो सबकन्शियसली भइहाल्यो, नमस्ते अंकल, नमस्ते आन्टी. अनि पसलहरुमा पनि यहाँ उधारो पाइन्न भनेर त्यो. That was really fun. Maybe we can like I feel like this question is quite relevant. So if that's okay, I'm going to bring in one of our participants who has a question, I know. So Sangkalpa, do you decide the guests based on your interests fully, or do you wonder about the guests following and how that might help amplify your podcast and its reach? So, and also, if it's the latter, if you think about how popular this potential guest is, have you ever had to prepare for a podcast that you weren't personally really excited about, but you still did it because, because of their potential likes and their fan following? And how did you pump yourself up for this podcast that you didn't really want to do, but you had to do? That question.
Thank you for the question. With my podcast, I'm 101% interested in all my guests, and that really makes it easier for me to be excited about the interviews, research about them, and like put in my heart and soul when I'm like editing and putting the episode out there. So I don't think I can answer the other 3-4 other questions at the end. But most of my guests are definitely the stories that have interested me in one way or another, and I wanted to really get to know them, that part of their story, and share their stories. If it's not a story that I'm interested in, then I wouldn't do it, because like for me, I need to be excited about the person. And I think you can tell that from my voice as well. When I'm excited, you can tell. And I don't want to have a mediocre Khalko episode either. So I'm always interested in my guest stories. I should probably think more about the fan following and a little bit more. So I would have, I'll think about it. And if I ever do that, I'll keep you updated.
Just to follow up on the same question, I think maybe SVG had also asked was, how do you go about selecting your guests? Because we have such a diverse, guest list from all walks of life. But how do you obviously the research comes on later, or like how do you even decide, okay, maybe I've spoken to people in who are more publicly known for their work versus someone whose work might not necessarily be known so much to the public. So how do you what kind of thought goes into how you select the guests?
I wish there was a thought process, to be honest. It's literally me going on Instagram, like social media. I use Instagram more than Facebook. It's literally me going on Instagram and looking through all these different personalities or different individuals out there. For example, before I reached out to Janaki, one of the guests I'd had before, and a friend of mine told me about her already. And I was really interested because she's actually working as a nurse, but is part of this really great brand called Hempnath in the UK. And for me, when someone does something different to what they're actually doing in life, that gets me really interested. And so I reached out to her. So it's just finding these people online, looking at their thing, and maybe doing a little Google search to see if I can find anything, and it'll interest me. And I'm like, oh, what is this? Or you can just buy one. Yep, this is the person. So I just make a list of people that I'm potentially going to reach out to. And then I just start reaching out to them and scheduling them in if they're interested. In saying that, I do have a few people who leave me on scene, how on Instagram DM you can see their scene. So that's happened as well, and that's completely fine, because again, I have nothing to lose. I've just asked you, and obviously you're not obliged to say anything back to me. So there's been two sides of the story as well.
So this is a question from Sangkalpa Gurung. Do you know her, Sangkalpa? You had
do.
Okay, this is a question from Timur Chinne Manse. What is the most, okay, I feel like she's on to something here. What is the most embarrassing moment or conversation you've had with a guest? And how do you keep it? And how do you keep cool when you interview someone like Sadzan Rajbaidya?
I feel like embarrassing moments, I kind of blocked them out of my memory. Going completely blank on that, to be honest. In terms of interviewing guests, I get so nervous when I'm doing interviews, whether it's someone like Sadzan or someone that no one knows as much. And I just walk around the block. I text everyone, say, oh my God, I hyperventilate. And on the interview, I'm just putting my hands like under my thighs, like not trying to wriggle, and like taking breaths during the thing, and just thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm actually doing this. Wow. And like when Varsha was there, and she was so nice, and like both Saza, like all the guests in my thing, they're all very nice, and I'm thinking they're the ones who actually put me at ease. Okay? So if I think they weren't giving me that kind of energy that I was trying to get, then it'd be very different and awkward for both of us. Because they're also lovely and nice and warm. I just feel like I'm chatting with someone who like I've known of, and it's not someone like high up there, okay? But I do have my fangirl moments as well. And I like at the end, I'm like, oh my God, like, and I just blurt out my crazy like fans, like after like I have to tell you, and I just like blurt it out, and they think I'm crazy, but this to me, so it's all good.
So please tell us your fangirl moment, or is that not allowed?
Oh, fangirl moment. It was both with Sajan and Varsha, and also Arpana. Like just hearing theirs, and with Arpana, it actually, the thing is, Arpana ko gardahi, she was one of the 5th guest. She was introduced to me by a friend of a friend, which I didn't think would happen, but I was like so glad it did. We had our interview pura time milaera, when I was trying to save the recording, I was using Zencastr at that time. My part recorded, her part didn't record.
Oh,
that's the worst, no?
It is, that's the worst.
Already panicking, I know about interview gardakheri. Interview sakyo bhanera, I'm like, okay, that's a relief. And then that happened. Oh my God, I felt like crying and shouting at the same time. And I asked her if she can like refresh something on her end to see if that will work. It didn't. And I was like, I told her what happened, and I said, oh, don't worry, like it's fine. She was like, do you want to reschedule? And I'm like, are you sure? Like, because she's already given me her time. And for her to even like say, do you want to reschedule? And I was like, felt so nice, but also bad. But she was nice. So we did the whole thing again in a week's time, and I made sure everything was downloaded this time before we hung up. And after that, I've been very, very nervous, and I check everything before we leave.
Yeah. Okay. That can be quite a nightmare. Yeah, we've been through that. But that also, I just want to ask you about something that a lot of people who might be, like, again, we really want to use this platform for our listeners to sort of like take away tips and like learnings from podcasters. So you mentioned like a software, right? So for a lot of people, something that they ask, and we've been doing, Itisha and I've been doing long distance for quite a while now, pre-pandemic. So people are like, how did you manage pre-pandemic? We're like, it was always a pandemic sort of situation for us, even before 2020. So how do you, because for you also, like you started your podcast as being done solely remotely. So if you could, tell what kind of softwares you use, how do you, like some of the experiences you've had?
So when I started, I would meet the person on Zoom. So we have the video, but I record the audio on this software called Zencastr. So they're both free softwares, I know. So because Zencastr, you can record individual recordings separately.
Okay.
It was really good. So I did that. But after the whole fiasco with Arpana, wanted something else. And I then realized Zoom button, you can just record 2 different lines anyways. You can weird, like muting Zoom and turning Zencastr on, otherwise there would be an echo. Just be learning so many things like on my first episode as well. So then I just stick with Zoom now. Editing, so everything I do on this software called Reason. And that is something that my husband uses. So I don't know anything about music or editing, and that's the one he used, and he just installed it to my laptop. And that's the one we go with. In terms of hosting platform, we use like an older model called Podbean. And then we host the podcast itself. There's so many different podcasting platforms, you guys already know. And it's just a matter of choosing which one fits you and what you want to do in the future with it. Yeah.
So one more question I wanted to ask Sangkalpa before we sort of start wrapping up is, have you ever thought about exploring a different format for your podcast? Like, so going beyond the interview model, okay?
I haven't really, I really enjoy this aspect, the interviewing part. I enjoy getting to know other people, their stories, and sharing their stories. That's my main purpose. In terms of like, I have thought about maybe YouTube as well, but I don't like getting ready as much. Like I want to show up how I want to, because the video is just like to get to know my guests. It's just the audio part that's important. Because I'm doing this with all my other responsibilities, I don't want anything added extra either on top of it. We have thought of making it a brand and working it into something else maybe in the future. It's a podcast. But one thing that's really great about the listeners is if we're doing any projects, they're really involved. Lockdown ke belama, we had this whole thing Nepalma tyo migrant workers or like help गर्ने, all that crisis. Titi bela, my sister worked on this project postcard ma. We were selling like postcards for £5 each, and 100% of the sales went to Blink Now organization. In 1 week we were able to raise £500, and that was all from our listeners, and they were sharing and everything. So it's good to be able to build something onto it when we need something we're passionate about. I want to keep it at that level. Okay, I don't want to make it something that I can't organize or plan or manage. Just leave it where it feels comfortable.
If there are no questions from the audience, you did touch a little bit about the support the community has provided when you take on other projects. But I remember I think you also have some sort of like how listeners can support your work. Have you tried doing that, and you experienced with that? Because a lot of our earlier speakers also, like Nandar also said, like not everyone has the capacity to apply for big grants or funds, or you're doing so many things on the side. So there are like opportunities from where like your community itself can come to support as like an acknowledgement of your work, and so have you experimented with something like that?
Last year we did try Patreon ma start garne, but it hasn't really done much. And the thing is, I haven't really promoted it much either. It was just there to see what it will do. We've had one-off contributions from a few listeners, but besides that, we haven't really done much about it. We just got busy with our lives as well, sort of like lost touch there. So we're thinking of maybe once Hamro Yatra is more regular as well, maybe merchandising or anything of that sort. But again, I don't want to take it away from the actual work itself. I know. And it's like this balance, like I would love to work part-time and do this part-time as well, so I can really focus on this, making it like even better than it is. But that's not the reality at the moment. I don't have the capacity to maybe think of making it a reality either. So maybe next year time boy, but maybe I can have a look at that. But let's say it's just the podcast.
So if you all are here like Hamro Yatra, and because you listen to this podcast done by this one woman team, please like go support her on Patreon, because we know how difficult it is to kind of create this content, spend so much time on interviewing, researching stuff, and we're doing it all for free. So if you can, if you're able to support your podcasters. And maybe on that note, a last question, Sangkalpa, is how do you see yourself, your experiences, your identity being reflected in the guests that you've had? Or have you found that at all?
I think it's mostly in the experiences we can share. Like just as an example, when I was interviewing Arpana, she was talking about like the Tamilko Dinoru, where she used to work, and I was like, she used to work in Java like when she was 16 or 17 years old.
Oh, as like a barista. Oh,
yeah, like guy serving garlic halkoki, because she wanted, like, it was a cool place and she wanted to like earn some pocket money. I mean, that's so unheard. And she was, I think, the first woman who was hired to like work there.
Oh.
I mean, so like just things like that. I'm like, oh my God, I remember going to Java. Like everyone, like it's like part of like a ritual. So I think it's like having that connection and feeling like you've had such a rich childhood. Like you don't realize it when you're overseas because you see so many things, and again you compare and everything, but you've had such a wonderful childhood. Nepal mein huncha ni, and you take that for granted sometimes. And I really do enjoy asking guests about their childhood, because there's so many things sometimes they themselves realize that it has impacted them in their adulthood. And it almost sometimes becomes like a therapy session, which I really do enjoy. So I think in terms of identity, it's all of us being like growing up in Nepal, and trying to make something out of yourself in an overseas country. And especially like there are stories where when people have moved, like before Google and everything, like you couldn't search like weather kosto huncha, like how do you get from the airport to something, like you take so many things for granted because you haven't done so many things, and you just learn slowly. You can look at Instagram and see what the fashion is like wherever you're going, or look at the weather channel, and it wasn't like that when we moved, like back in 2000. So just sharing those stories, and every generation, I think they have their own problems or their own issues that they talk about. So it's just interesting that we all come back and connect with from our Nepali identity. Like like if you listen to my podcast, 98% of my guests, their favorite meal or their one meal they choose is always dal bhat. And so they might have like all the cuisines in the world, but that's what they think of, that's what they would like. So that's very heartwarming.
I'd also like that if somebody makes it for me, please.
Yeah, right now I'm actually hungry. So
my last question to Sangkalpa, in some of your episodes, you do talk about mental health also, or at least that's a theme that has emerged in many of your episodes. And I was wondering, because the attitude towards mental health, seeking therapy, in Nepal, still, I think we have a long way to go in Nepal. By that say, like, how would you say people of the Nepali community approach like mental health or issues, or sort of acknowledging that help is required? I don't know.
Yeah. So it's funny you mentioned this, because I've recently just registered as a provisional psychologist here in Australia, because it is something very important to me and I'm really interested in this field. And one of the listeners, and I shared this on Hamro Yatra because I've been so quiet on Hamro Yatra and this has taken a lot of my time and effort. So I just wanted to share with my listeners what's been happening. One of my listeners reached out to me and said, it is really cool to see a Gurung person being like a psychologist. She's trying to see a therapist in London, but it's so difficult for her to relate to that person or that to understand where she's coming from. And she was also talking about how it's difficult for her parents to understand why she's seeking therapy, like she's not pagal. So that mentality is still there within the community. It's slowly about this new generation making it, being exposed to it and making it okay. Right? And like it's all about talking, and all about making it normal. So I think the more people are interested in it, the more they see people working in this field, they'll know. I think it normalizes mental health a little bit. Nepali community, like you said in Aldershot, it's such a tight-knit community, almost feels like Nepal. You have similar problems that you would think Nepal that community is like very similar, even though they're in like UK. So I think it's all about having conversations now and again, like just being able to explain, listen to them, and normalizing it slowly. Okay, like it won't happen overnight. It is very important, and I think even like our bojubajais would really benefit from it. Okay. Because being like it's so difficult for them as well, and like they have their own struggles. So I think everyone can benefit. You don't want to go to that breaking point and then have to see a therapist. You want to be able to maintain your mental health, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, as almost like a preventative measure. No? Yeah. No, absolutely. And yeah, like all the best.
Congratulations.
Congratulations and all the best. That sounds fantastic. We definitely need more Nepali therapists, psychologists. Yeah. I think we're almost out of time. So, Sangkalpa, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. I felt like we were recording a Bojubajai episode. It was like,
yes, it did feel like that.
This 1 hour went by so quickly. Like, it's amazing. Thank you.
No, thank you for joining us, and we do hope that you find the time and you find the resources, and maybe hopefully in the future you have the financial support also to hire more people to help you, yeah, so that you can continue Hamro Yatra and sort of bring these stories for your listeners, for the communities in Nepal and abroad. Please follow Hamro Yatra and please become a Patreon of Hamro Yatra also.
Yes.
You've got to do it. You've got to promote it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for